Good afternoon to everyone who's joined the Focus 24/7 number 9 webinar, which is going to be all around Workday Financials. Wanted to just remind everyone that's on the call to ask your questions via the Q&A today. It's very, very important, probably more important than it's been in the past, because I don't have anyone sending me specific questions. So please put your questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of the webinar. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Kevin Isaac. Kevin is one of the most experienced Workday Financials project managers in the EU market. He's done over 4 full lifecycle implementations from start to finish. And without further ado, please, Kevin, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I say it's Kevin Isaac. I've been a project manager for longer than I want to say, really. Managed supply chain, warehousing, inventory, and latterly mainly financials projects. And that would be across Oracle, Dynamics, and, as you say, in the last few years, Workday Financials.
Yep.
I had the pleasure of implementing the first UK headquartered implementation of Workday Financials at King, and so worked in that ecosystem since then, and have actually worked for Workday itself for a few months and trained myself as a financials consultant and an engagement manager. So yeah, pleased to be here and pleased to be able to give some of my knowledge across to everyone involved.
We're very pleased to have you, and thank you for agreeing to come on the show. Normal format is we talk about a specific topic and then we pause for Q&A at the end. Feel free to, again, ask your questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of the webinar. Very, very important, again, today, because I don't have anyone helping in the background, which none of you guys see normally. So the first topic that we've discussed, Kevin, is, Workday's had such a great run in the EU the last few years. I mean, 7-8 years. They've, I wouldn't be talking out of turn if I said Workday's dominated the HCM space. And in the last few years, they've really been pushing financials to both UK and EU-based customers. Of course, the US is way ahead of the UK and Europe, but we're seeing a lot of large customers at the moment either implementing Workday Financials or planning to implement Workday Financials, which is fantastic for the ecosystem. And we've discussed that, we believe that Workday is a continuously evolving software. So it's always changing,
Yes.
with the upgrades every 6 months. And that's what we're going to have the first topic on, isn't it?
I think so, yeah, yes. I'd say ultimately we're going to talk about the team structure and how you structure a team, but I think the team structure itself needs to work back from Workday in production, because it's so different, and it's so different to the standard, like an Oracle implementation or something like that, in that it is an evolving piece of software and it's evolved and pushed to you on a 6-monthly basis. And that push means that you need to have a team and a structure in production to be able to understand the system, be able to work with the system, and also get involved in the Workday ecosystem so that they can both put forward ideas and also understand the developments that are coming their way and get involved in developing those, and also get involved in the preview cycle of the implementation. So it'll arrive every 6 months, but you've got 6 weeks in the preview. You need a team that gets involved in that, and you need a team that can actually not necessarily configure, but amend the system whilst it's live to enable the business to evolve as well.
Yeah.
So that, as I say, the difference there is with a traditional type of software, you'd implement it and then you'd leave it. It would remain as it is until the business decided to do something else with it, and then they'd initiate another project. This one, it's implemented and then it moves, and it moves with you and it moves without you as well, because I'll implement stuff, it's pushed, you may not use it, but you may want to use it, and you need to have an organization that's able to receive that type of evolving software. And I think that comes from how you structure the project team to enable that development of the support network and the business process owner network to be able to not be a point in time handover, but an evolving move from project lifecycle to business lifecycle. I think that sort of way of working your project team back from that position enables you to get the project team right. And if you don't get the project team right, you won't have that when you're in production.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here wondering whether I should say this or not. And typical me, I'm going to say it. In the RFP cycles for customers, so if you're looking to change your HCM, whatever your HCM on premise or whatever you've got as an organization, normally it's a fairly simple process, right? Because HR is you're implementing a software for your performance, your talent, your recruiting, whatever, and it is business critical, but it isn't going to make your company fall down if it goes wrong. Whereas finance, and I think this is perhaps where customers have. A lot of customers have taken some time to get finance off the ground.
Yeah.
To adopt finance and get big customers to agree to implement Workday Financials, because but certainly a few years ago it wasn't tried and tested in large organizations. But as a CFO, and I've never operated, of course, as a CFO, but as a CFO, you must be thinking to yourself, okay, well, everything's stable right now with my finance system, whether that's Oracle, SAP, whatever you've got, but it's not got the functionality that Workday Financials has got. But you're taking this big risk, and of course it's expensive as well. It's a big risk to put your finance on. Do you see what I'm trying to get at here?
I do.
Do you think it's more of a decision for a company to go, yeah, we're gonna change our finance software, rather than it is for a company to say we're going to go and implement a cloud system for HCM?
I think it is, which probably is why Financials has lagged slightly behind HCM in its rollout and implementation numbers in the UK and in Europe. I know, speaking to one of the early developers of Financials, it was actually built into HCM at the very first go. So Workday 1 had the Financials in it. It just never developed forward. And when we did the RFP at King, and we built the RFP and we got all the first vendors into the room to do their presentations, you could tell that the CFO just thought, well, the finance system has Oracle or SAP on the box. It doesn't have Workday on the box. And it is a risk because, as you say, it appears expensive, but if you put a 5-year costing on it and you never have to pay for another upgrade, and you'll get upgrades that remain compliant with any financial regulations, tax regulations, etc., and you don't have to do anything to do those, then it starts to actually level out against the other bigger or other systems as well, because that cost base goes. But I think in selling it in or making it successful in the RFP process, you need to get the finance organisation and procurement organisations to just think slightly differently, because it is different to a traditional finance system. And I think we found sometimes you think that HR people, leaders of HR, tend to be more forward-looking or able to adopt something new, whereas you're right, CFOs are very, or can be seen to be very, I need the numbers to add up. Will this new box add the numbers up for me as well?
Yeah.
You can prove that it can. Once you've proven it can, and it's got features that enable a smarter way of working and a better way of working and a smoother way of getting your financial results out, then you can sell that in. But I think Workday sometimes don't sell the speed of operation as much as probably they could do, but the RFP should pull that out. And if you get the right people building the RFP to go out to tender, then you can get a better solution in choosing the right product.
Yeah. Do you think there's still? Do you think there's still that apprehension from CFOs? Are you seeing that? Because I know, even though I know you're obviously working on a big program at the moment for a very important customer for Workday, I know that you get involved in system selection processes. Do you still see that apprehension from CFOs specifically, where it's like, okay, we've got the cost, which is, funny enough, we were talking about this half an hour ago, right? With the
Yes.
with the new office, which 200 people have liked it. 10,000 people have actually viewed that today, which is amazing. So, and it's like when they send you the contract, they send you the whole price. So of course, I mean, Workday is. I mean, if I'm sitting there going, oh my God, how much, for this new office? You can imagine potentially what other people are sitting there thinking about a cloud system, specifically Workday, which is the best one, arguably the best one, but also the most expensive in some cases. So do you still see that, like, oh, it's expensive,
Well, you do, yes, you do, because the different benefits you get are harder to quantify as a number. So you buy Workday, it costs, as you say, a lot, but you don't need an IT department to develop it and support it.
Yeah.
So there's a cost saving there. I don't suddenly want to get rid of everyone's IT departments, but that's cost. Or even if you don't, I know, but even if, like, when we implemented at King, we didn't have an IT department who were there to support big systems. So it became, you bring in this system and you actually have to start building an IT support network, or you buy Workday and you don't. So it's a cost you don't have to develop. And then the way Workday works in ensuring that data is correct at the time you make the first operational transaction means you don't have to spend loads of time correcting it at month end. Month end works because the numbers add up every single time you create a transaction. So that you bring out those less tangible benefits in speed of operation and speed and accuracy of data. They are costed. You can cost them. And if you take them into an overall cost benefit of having this system versus another one that you probably have to spend a lot of time making sure the data's accurate at the end of a month or the end of a quarter or whatever, then you start to get an overall cost benefit that makes the CFO smile a little bit more.
Yeah.
And if you're publicly funded and you're listed, speed of numbers to the market obviously is key to a CFO's level of thinking, rather than probably someone who's an AP clerk or an AR clerk who works in areas like that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think as well, like that focus, and we're not, we're 30 odd people, but with our contractors and the number of contractors that we have and the number of permanent placements that we invoice for every single month, it does take some time to get month end done. So for me to physically get management accounts, and I'm just trying to think if our finance manager, in fact, he has come to me and said, well, actually, I was the one that went to him and said, we've got to do this quicker. Like, I can't be waiting for, I need to know, I need to know this information quicker than you're giving it to me. So why don't you go away and find a solution, a piece of software that will do it in a couple of days, because it's taking over a week at the moment. It's long. It's a long process for us.
That's probably a week, 10 days, how long it takes most organisations to retread the numbers at the end of the month, whereas Workday has a continually balanced balance sheet and profit and loss.
Which
you might look at the numbers and say they don't look right. Let's go back up this one number. But at any point in time in the day, and that therefore is a cost saving, that you could say to the CFO, this might be expensive, but look, if you want to know the numbers, I'll send you a report. You can look at the report. You can look at it moving all day long, and it will move all day long, but you've got it then. You don't have to come to finance to say, where's the numbers and are they accurate? Put the work in up front to make sure they are accurate at the beginning, then they're always accurate. And you don't get that necessarily in other systems.
I'd pay for that. I've got to be honest.
You wouldn't pay that much for it, but you'd pay for it.
I would pay substantial amounts of money. We've got quite a few participants on the call. We've probably got a sales guy from Workday going, really? You're going to hit after this then. But no, I would pay, absolutely. I would pay substantial amounts for that because
And I think the things that probably a lot of RFPs miss is asking that type of question. So you write an RFP and you go around to the different areas and you'll say, what do you want? And you get very operationally focused system functionality.
Yeah.
Whereas at the same, you need all of that because that's where 95% of the activity is happening at the operational level. But then it's going to the C-level people and ask them what's their big drivers. And as I say, the CEO, the COO, the CFO, they're going to want their numbers on day +2 or day +3, not day +9.
Yeah.
And therefore, then you can go, that gives you almost 2 levels of your selection process. It's functionally, operationally, plus the richness of the data and the speed of the data. And then Workday starts to comes up the queue and then matches the bigger ones that come in cheaper in the first iteration, but 3 years down the line, they're either left behind or you spent more money enhancing them.
Yeah. You got to, I think with these things, and I guess it's like that with every cloud implementation, it's the time as well, isn't it? It's the time that you can't quantify your time in money, but you have to in order to justify the cost of a new system.
Of course you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing it. Yeah. If you're doing it, you can never make sure you've made the right decision, unfortunately, because you can't look into the future.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to do it as best as possible, you would quantify, you do a time motion study to a certain level of degree on cost of operations, headcount on operations, and those sorts of things to get to your number.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions I want to ask you before we move. We're going to move on to topic 2 shortly as well, which is around team structure, which I'd love to hear your views on that. And we've already got some Q&A coming in about people and what people suit which roles. Again, I'd be very, very interested to hear your thoughts on that because I know quite a few good finance guys, and I've always asked, what do you think? If you had someone who was training into Workday Financials but didn't have Workday Financials, would you take someone from Oracle Financials or SAP Financials and train them into Workday? And it's interesting because 9 times out of 10, the answer that I've got from partners and actual people who are very experienced Workday Financials consultants and leads is not the one that I thought that I'd get. So I'd be interested to see about your views on that. So let's talk about some of the functionality changes. So I'm going to ask you a really difficult question here. You've been in Workday Financials for so many years, and you've done these big projects, and you've seen the developments of the software on the upgrades and how good it is now. What's your honest view on what it was like when you started compared to other finance software?
Well, our comparisons at King when we did our RFP at the final stage, we took our final 3. It was SAP, Business All-in-One or Business One. I can't remember exactly which one of the SAPs. Microsoft Dynamics and Workday. And I think Workday was the gamble because it didn't give us everything we needed. And King's not a complex organization whatsoever. Candy Crush Saga for those who don't know what King do. SAP was too big. We didn't need something that big. And Dynamics had probably a better functional and reach than Workday did. Our decision point, we had Workday HR in. So we had Workday HR, therefore it made more sense to bring finance and HR into the same box. You get so many more benefits from having people and finance in the same box.
Yeah.
And we lived with some of the gaps we had. And I think the biggest gap we had was VAT. The VAT and tax for the UK market wasn't there.
That's recently come, isn't it?
That's recently come. And Workday didn't have a perfect UK payroll. In fact, I think at the time they were linking to another payroll provider, and now they brought payroll inside. So we had to work around those with integrations, and on the tax, we had to do a lot of configuring inside the system and building reports inside the system with Workday. And Workday and Deloitte were our partners on that product. But going back to the evolving software, King and King's VAT people worked with Workday and specified Workday's UK tax, UK VAT piece of work and the developments. And then that enabled Workday to understand the UK market because they could use King as their reference point. They brought in, I think, Skybet were one of their next customers. So Skybet and King worked with Workday as a development team to build the UK VAT functionality, which then, I suppose, the core VAT engine was in place, which then they then took that into the other European countries. So those are areas that have been built on. Payrolls come in-house, so now you have payroll inside Workday, which for finance is an amazing thing. You think that payroll automatically posts to the ledger. You don't have to have an integration to another payroll system that you maybe have a coding conversion or something. It posts to the ledger. And the VAT has evolved even further. King, current client Nuffield, have got their own VAT rules that they need to put in place, and Workday are working with us to put that into the system around healthcare and charity. So those areas evolving, and Workday working with clients to implement for them where they can see that opportunity exists somewhere else. So then they've got a piece of development that they can sell on to other charities and other healthcare companies as well.
Yeah, it's developed a lot, hasn't it, since that initial first.
Yes. And I think, like you said earlier on, as more people come on board, then they see the opportunity to move the financial developments up the line, taking priority over some of the HR developments and getting in there. So it's working well.
Yeah. Do you think that I'll probably have to ask someone from Workday this on a webinar like this, but whether they would tell me is another thing. Do you think when they came to the UK, I mean, I've always known the UK market quite well, and okay, for the last 5 years, I've been quite heavily involved in Focus Cloud finances. But before that, I kind of just knew about it with other companies that I worked for. And I always remember someone saying something to me, this is probably 20 years ago, because if you don't know about VAT, you don't know about VAT yet. And I didn't know about VAT 20 odd years ago. And I remember this phrase was, everything's got VAT on it in the UK. So if a client asked you, is that plus VAT? They wouldn't really ask that because everything's got that. It's always plus VAT. And I remember that phrase. And so why would a company who's selling a finance software come to the UK, sell it in the UK without a VAT solution?
Well, I think the VAT in the UK is incredibly complex if you compare it to the sales tax in the UK, in the US.
Yeah.
In the US, each state has a different sales tax rates. Anyway, I don't exactly know, but in the UK, we have, you might say everything's got VAT, but it could be zero rated, or it could be exempt, or it could have a different percentage, or it could be inbound or outbound VAT. So it's not, and therefore building it into the engine itself would have taken, I suppose, a leap of faith of getting the customer base to make it viable to build it into the engine until you arrive in that country. And you arrive in that country, they built something to enable us to go live, and then they could see okay, we've got enough customers now to build it on. Because you go to France, they're probably slightly different. You go to Germany, they're slightly different. So they have the ability to do a sales tax. It's just how complex they make that ability from country to country.
Interesting. There was from my Oracle days.
Everything's VATable, but different rates.
Okay.
It's exempt.
You learn something new every day. Peter, my finance guy, does all that stuff and tells me when I ask him for the report, which takes too long. Hence why we need Workday. Someone please reach out to me and sell me Workday. I need it. I remember from my Oracle recruiting days, especially when there was a solution called R12. So I was involved in 11.5.9, I think it was,
Yeah.
around that. That's when I was recruiting in Oracle. Then 11.5.10, and then R12.
Yeah.
And in R12, which had to be re-implemented, there was a VAT solution. Right? You know what I'm talking about because you've done that, right? So there was a VAT solution, and being I think, and very much so what we've done as an organization, we've chosen a very, very niche product to specialize in here, which is Workday. What I did in the Oracle market is I chose a very, very niche part of Oracle to specialize in. And that solution was eTax. Do you remember eTax?
I don't know. I do know R12 because I implemented that at Electronic Arts, but probably not to the level of that niche area. But yes.
Well, there was a module in R12 called eTax, and it was a separate module all the way. So you would have like an all singing, all dancing financials guy who'd done 5, 6, 7 implementations, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's a good guy, really good guy, qualified accountant. R12, you couldn't put them into an eTax role in R12.
Probably not.
You had like at one point there was I remember their names as well. I'm not getting that old after all. There was 2 guys who was in the UK. One of them was working for Oracle, and I placed him on a contract. And these guys were earning bundles of money. So I can understand perhaps going back to what they come into the UK without that solution up front, but then developing it, and how important that's been for them to capture new customers for the future. So I can understand that. Let's go on to some Q&A, Kevin. So let me just have a look here. We've got Stephen who's asked, do you find that particular roles have a particular type of person?
Roles have a particular type of person?
Yeah, it's probably something that we could cover in topic 2.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Stephen. We'll come back to that one in topic 2 because we're going to talk about team structure.
Give me a chance to think about it.
He's asked another one here. Do you find that HR versus finance have a particular type of person?
So we'll come back to it. Then Leamington. Yes.
HR versus finance cultures. That would be something that we could answer, I guess, for topic 1. The cultural differences.
There's obviously a cultural difference between HR and finance. I've got to be careful not to get too stereotypical. But finance people are analytical and live on numbers, and they live on accuracy. So they're probably more defined on getting it right and getting it decided what is right before they'll go forward on a decision. So I've never managed a HR project, and the things you do need to get nailed to be able to move forward. But I would imagine, and having worked with people in HR, that they're not as number and analytical based, and therefore they might allow things to move forward and allow some things to evolve and see what happens, and evolve a solution. Whereas in finance, they want it nailed before they go to the next stage, because they'll be worried that their numbers won't add up or won't move forward. And there's very, very precision based on making sure it's going to work for them. And I think you made a point earlier on, Laura, it's a risk thing. Finance are less risk. They're more risk averse than other parts of an organisation, because it's based on getting it right and getting the numbers right. Because once they're published, you can't go back and unpublish them.
Do you think they're more risk adverse, or do you think they're more concerned about the amount of risk for culturally?
Probably second one, actually. Yes, the second point. Yeah, they're more concerned about it, and rightly so. I think, as you say, if you put the numbers out on the street, you can't take them back again.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say we've got 3,500 employees, you could go back and say we've got 3,700, and no one's going to really get overly concerned about it. But you can't publish a number on the balance sheet and then change it.
I'll tell you a funny story, and this is related to what we're talking about. In the early days of Focus, I actually used to do all of the payments for all of our contractors. So you can imagine me sitting there going, right, sort code, account number. Honestly, I was doing it manually with the card, and I was logging into the bank. It was manual. Everything was manual. And then what I decided to do was outsource our invoicing function to an external accountant, right? And everything was going very, very well. They had Sage, so whereas we were a little bit manual internally at the time, they had Sage, and everything was just it took away the headaches, took away my headaches. And one moment, one day I was walking down the road to go and get lunch, I think it was. I haven't actually told anyone about this. I don't know why I'm telling you, but I am. I was walking down the road and I was going to get lunch, literally just down the road from the Gatwick office, and I saw in the top office accountancy firm. So I wonder if, because the other accountant would charge me a lot of money, even though it was working swimmingly well and I didn't have any issues, I thought, I wonder how much they would do it for. So I went up there and negotiated a price, which was actually a quarter of the price that the other one was.
Actually could do.
Was it's pretty good, pretty good. So I handed the notice in and started off with this new accountancy company, to the annoyance of my other accountancy.
Yeah.
Right. They was like, no, you shouldn't do that, and I was like, yeah, you're saying that because you've lost the business. And 1 week it took me to go, stop everything you're doing, and went back to the guy with my towel between my legs.
Yep.
Because invoices were wrong. Just, stuff that you just don't want to be wrong. So, you can imagine, I'm in my position in a small company, probably turning over £1 million at the time or whatever it was. And then you've got these big, powerful CFOs in charge of multi-million pounds.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong for them, what do they do? Interesting. We got quite a few questions here, so I'll try and get through as many as I can. Okay, so we've got a question here. I'm expecting you to be nice to me as well, Kevin. I feel lucky to be in the Workday market. This person says they feel lucky to be in the Workday market. Are the people you come across, including recruiters, the reason why you stuck around both professionally and personally?
In the Workday market?
Yes. It's my smile.
It is. It's strangely, the Workday market's like a big family, and it sounds dull and a little bit twee, but you're going to bump into the same people again, because it's not a huge market. It's quite a small market. It probably will grow, and therefore you make those connections. And you, when you work on a project, you make a connection. You normally say, yeah, we'll get together again sometime or whatever. And you might socially, but the chances of getting back onto a project with the same person you met on a project 2 years ago outside of the Workday community are fairly remote, unless you bring them on yourself. Whereas in Workday, people I worked with on Workday when I was at Clarion, for example, still connected. Now they work for a partner, but I know I'll work with that person again. So you're always going to keep meeting and working with people that you worked with before. So you can build longer relationships, and you can build better trusted relationships.
Yeah.
I think that's the same as you're saying, same with recruiters, because they're also within the Workday space, and therefore they're going to call on you, and you know to call on them because they know the people as well that you need. So it works for everybody.
And how do you feel about the recruiters in the Workday space? No, I don't know.
They're really good.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's okay. Invoice on its way.
Did you before? Do you foresee Workday across financials and HCM being bold enough in the future to offer a genuine no-cost pilot to explore pros and cons up front? Good question.
That's a very good question.
Very, very good question. It's almost like, because I like this. I like going to market and saying, we're not even doing it for the money.
I think they would need to see. They'd need to see the benefit then. If it was a big, huge, top 100 FT company that was going to get out of Oracle and go to Workday, and therefore it became a massive badge on Workday's front door, then there's a possibility. Funnily enough, our finance controller at King, when we were negotiating our price at King, did say to them, well, as we're the first UK-based company to have financials, we should get it for free. King aren't that big, are they? So after everyone stopped laughing, we got a small reduction. But it could work. If you, I don't know, a big, a really big name that everyone would stand up and go, wow, and therefore others would follow through the door, then you could see there's a possibility.
Yeah.
I think that would be the only way, I would imagine.
I think for finance, for HCM, of course, you've got Walmart, you've got Amazon.
Yeah, they probably don't need it for HCM, but financials across Europe, maybe it would work.
Once or twice. There are, 10, 20, 30,000 implementations for finance, but no massive organizations, no huge, like when Sanofi went Workday, and they're an SAP shop. And I don't know whether the SAP sales guys actually recovered still, even to this day. And it was 5 years ago that they lost the deal.
It's something like that. Something that's a big, embedded in Oracle for years, or SAP. And then someone decided to, okay, we're going to go Workday, which is a big deal because we're going to unplug everything we've got. And it's a big badge. Then that might be a game changer for them. And therefore there's an advantage in doing it.
Yeah. I'll try and get the answer. I know something. In what ways Workday different from SAP, FICO, and how user-friendly is Workday for companies and consultants?
I don't know. I don't know a lot about SAP or its architecture. The difference that Workday has from other is that it's one line of code. It, as I said before, everyone thinks financials was an add-on, but financials and HCM were built at the same time. HCM got developed a little bit more, but so the financials embedded code is embedded with HCM. It's not two modules stuck together. And a lot of the SAP offerings and the Oracle offerings, they bought companies or they bought products and then they bolted them together.
Yeah.
So an example, if someone moves departments in Workday and in the HCM side they change their cost center, you don't even have to worry about it. That's in financials already. So their costs immediately go to the new cost center. You don't have to think about doing it in another system. It happens. It's done. So I think that's Workday's difference, is it's all in one area. And the usability, if you can use Google as a search engine or you can use Amazon to buy something, you can use Workday. The procurement part of Workday is like Amazon in reality. You requisition something, you buy something. If you can do it in Amazon, you can do it in Workday. It makes training quite easy because it is very user-friendly.
Yeah.
It almost, you do what's sensible because it's a sensible type system. Like, no one trains you how to use Amazon. No one trains you how to use other parts of the internet. You go and work it out for yourself. Yeah. Very similar to Workday. You go and work it out for yourself. It's obvious where you put the name. You don't have to think about it. Lots of it, it's all drop-down lists. You don't need to know any codes. It's all inside the system. So if you want to buy, a false leg, for example, because I'm working for a healthcare company, you don't have to remember the code for the false leg. You go to the list and you buy, I'll have that false leg. All the coding's behind the system, and that sort of thing. It's very easy for user-friendly. Yeah. It's on the mobile. It's on all the devices you want to have it on.
So, I could probably help with that as well from from a recruiter's point of view. So, Vijaya, from my point of view, whenever you speak to someone, let's say I speak to someone who's got Workday Financials experience, that's also implemented SAP Financials or Oracle Financials, and you always ask them the interesting question: what's better? They will always say, and I would say 95% of the time this works both for HCM and financials, but they always say that Workday is much easier to use. It's much more streamlined, and apparently, I know that one of the sales guys that we spoke to some time back, who he was selling Workday on the proviso that if you're selling it to a huge organization with an office in somewhere in Eastern Europe, where perhaps there's someone in the factory that doesn't know how to use a computer, that person can use Workday because it's that easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that helps. And then I completed my first Workday Financials implementation as a test manager in the APAC region. It's now almost more than 10 months. The stage I entered in Workday Financials, I got very positive feedback from all the connections around the Workday space. That is a very good move, and it's got a future. How do you think moving forward on the career growth in Workday Financials? So it's more career advice. This is quite a long question. So I guess to roll that question up, Saktival was asking, he's done a couple of Workday Financials implementations as a test manager. He's a very good candidate, actually. So for the APAC region, excellent guy. And he's asking that because he hasn't got a project just yet for some months, but he's also got some HR experience. In your opinion, should he stay in finance or should he go back to HR?
I think they cover across both. I think from a test manager perspective, knowing Workday, the way a Workday team structure set up, knowing how to test with a cloud-based and with a partner and other components. HR, you're going to need all the building blocks you do for finance. So a test manager works across both. A good test manager who's implemented a Workday implementation, and as he said, he's done a couple. I would say I would take a test manager who's worked on HR to work on financials and vice versa. I'm not looking for the test manager to have the functional knowledge or the finance knowledge. I'll pull that knowledge from somewhere else. I want a test manager who knows how to test a cloud-based product that has a number of external partners involved in that, because that's a different skill than a fully internal team or something like that. So I wouldn't worry about switching between HR and financials.
Okay.
Or vice versa, go back the other way.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we've got topic 2. And topic 2 is about team structure. So tell us about team structure. So as a PM, another difficult question for you. So as a PM, I call you up about an implementation, financials implementation, but I tell you that there's budget constraints with the customer, with the end customer. Yeah, typical conversation. But there's budget constraints with the customer, and they cannot get what we would say a very strong internal project team for Workday. What part do you say, well, unless I've got that person in my team, I can't manage that project?
Interestingly, going back actually to the guy we talked about before, there's a couple of key people that you can fill around that you would need. I think you need a very strong business analyst who understands finance and ideally has worked on a Workday project, because then they know that piece. But business analysis is key. Otherwise, you don't necessarily map out the processes and understand the business before you bring the software on board. That test manager role, and getting a test manager in early as well, because then you test from the beginning. You're testing the requirements and you're testing each stage. I think a lot of times test manager is brought in at the end, probably to rescue bits that haven't been done properly, and then that's too late in the game. So those two, you've got areas of, there could be different sizings, but you're always going to have data migration, and you're always going to have integrations. And those two have specialism in them. There are people who just know how to handle multiple integrations and how to make sure that they're properly managed. Likewise, data migration, who just know how to unravel and untie the complexity of those two areas. And you can fill around that, and you can fill around those type of resources. But I think that's the key areas that I think I'd want.
Bare bones.
Yeah. Then I would fill around them. I wouldn't just want those, obviously, but I'd want more. But if that was where I would spend the money I had the most on those areas.
So stay a test manager.
Yes.
Yeah. It's good to be a test manager, isn't it, Sam? I know Sam's on the call. Okay. So a customer's gone through, or they started a Workday implementation. At what point do you think they should be starting to think about what happens when the partner leaves for their team structure?
Well, I think we're sort of leaning back into the first piece when I was mentioning that you need the organisation on the other side of the implementation to have the right people with the right knowledge.
Yeah.
And you're going to leave behind a support capability and a process ownership and super users. Because a lot of, unlike, again, the traditional implementations or applications, Workday is a business-led. The user community can do things in the system. They set up attributes. If you know, on the purchasing side, if you're suddenly going to buy 5 different things that you're not bought before, a super user can set that up in the system. You don't need an IT person to set that up in the system. So you need to have people who have built that knowledge up. And the best place for them to build that knowledge up is through the project lifecycle. Yeah. So you need to bring them into the project. Now, ideally, you would have permanent subject matter experts sitting within the project. That's not always possible. So you want to get as much participation at the greater level of percentage. So you don't have that sort of cliff edge of, we finished now, here you are, organisation, we're all leaving now and it's yours. And suddenly there's a huge learning cliff of people to pick up all the knowledge. Bring them onto the project, get them involved early, use their knowledge of the organisation, and then build up their knowledge of how Workday works and how it's implemented and how it's configured. And then they can own it going forward. And you get that evolution of knowledge rather than some sort of point in time. Yeah.
And going back to one of the questions from the first topic, which I think is the right time to answer that now. Yeah. We had someone ask, do you find that particular roles have a particular type of person? What type of person, if you're managing a team, an internal team, and you're advising the customer on what to hire, what type of person would you hire to go into a permanent role? Let's say, for example, without Workday Financials experience.
So is this to sit into, so like a process owner or a super user? The type of person, open-minded, analytical, because they would probably need to understand both how the current process works and then also how they can fit that around the Workday way of working. Because you can't develop Workday. You can't just sort of say, well, I want the screen to look like that, or I want the process to go like that, because it's not that type of system. So you need to have an analytical mind and an open mind to be able to take the existing processes and then see how they would operate with this new system. And that new system will open new doors, but it might also close a few ones that the organisation has always done it like that. But then you need to think, well, it's still going to get the end result, but it's going to get it in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset of someone who is able to look at something differently and understand that you're still getting the same result. You're just not doing it how it's always happened. And that takes a certain type of person, because someone who's always done it that way but can't flex their mind, then they'll butt up against Workday not being able to develop to fit how it's always been done.
Okay. Customer comes to you, you're the project manager, and they ask you to put forward a solution for permanent hires for support after the partner leaves and after effectively you leave after the implementation. And they give you three options. Option one is someone with Oracle Financials, SAP Financials, whatever financials experience. But this person's not that analytical, and they're not ideal from a personality point of view, but they do have this year's experience implementing systems.
Yep.
The second person is a Workday Financials person, who again is got some Workday Financials experience, can do the job, but actually they're not the right personality for that particular customer. Or an accountant, a fully qualified accountant, perhaps a chartered accountant, but no Workday Financials experience and no systems implementation experience, but absolutely top notch and personality on point with your customer. Which solution do you choose?
And this is for living with the system post?
Yes.
I'd go for option 3, because you're never going to have that level of access to the system that you can do the configuration that a trained consultant would do. But you can train them. There's various different training levels in Workday to be able to understand the system and be able to do the rudimentary updates that the user can do. But they've got that accounting experience. And if they're open-minded, they could trigger that accounting knowledge and experience and take on the evolution of the system with the training of Workday, which takes a while, but you're not trained in system development, you're trained in using the system. I think you'd get a better mix there of those two.
Yeah.
The Workday consultant type trained person is better on the implementation side rather than on the post-implementation side. And likewise the financials who've got experience in other systems, they're still useful, very useful on a project. You don't need to necessarily have Workday on the project side as long as you've got financials implementation. But I think the other side is the accountant who's prepared to work that little way back into a system rather than the other way around.
We've got some Workday Financials guys on the call, and they may find that very interesting, that bit of feedback. And there's a reason I asked you that, because we was doing a big project for a customer, trying to get them Workday Financials. When Workday Financials kicked off a few years ago, and every consultancy partner was looking for financials guys, and this partner came to me and they said, "Can you find us 20?" So the answer was yes over time, but they wanted them by a certain period.
Yeah. And
I was honest and said, you're just never going to get 20, because there might be perhaps 60, within the location or whatever you're looking for. But by the time you've gone after those 60, the other partners have offered more money than you're paying, and then you've lost that person, and then your pool of candidates becomes 40. And then it becomes 20, and then actually you only get 5. So if we was to look for someone outside of Workday Financials and maybe a cross-train, you may remember our cross-training posts. The interesting answer to that question was accountants.
Yeah.
They want accountants. They rather have accountants and rather than other system experience.
Yeah.
Moving into Workday.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, interesting.
For the accountants out there.
Sorry, say again?
For the accountants out there.
For the accountants out there, yeah. Which let me have a look at the participants. Have we got any accountants out? We've got all Workday experience guys here. So, but yeah, for the accountants out there, Workday's the one. You'll get a job in Workday. No problem at all. Do we want to talk some more about team structure, Kevin?
Yes. Yeah, I think that the one we've talked about SMEs and the specialists Obviously, you need good PMs depending on the size of the program.
I know one.
Sorry?
I know one.
You know one.
Yeah.
Program on at the moment, I've got 5 project managers working for me, so it doesn't have to be a 1 PM
I know them
job.
too.
And again, good to have financials experience, but more, I would look for someone who's had SaaS or cloud-based products experience, like a NetSuite or Dynamics in that respect. Mainly because cloud-based project is different to an in-house project, and there's a different way of working. And then you have the implementation partner, because you have to have an implementation partner, because that's the way Workday works in its community. But the one way that's always worked well with me is that they're part of the same team, and it's easy to do, but some people don't do it, and I think that's the key. If they're involved as one team, collaborate together, and the way we've got it working at Nuffield is all of our shared facilities, SharePoint, Jira, chat facilities, we're in the same space, so that people don't feel like they're different. They don't feel like it's 2 teams, and therefore that works much better, because then you don't get the wall, them and us. You're not passing things over a invisible but sometimes very visible wall that I finished my bit, it's your turn now, etc., etc. And you're always going to come across problems, you're always going to come across defects, but then they're seen as shared. It's a shared problem, shared defect, and we've all got to get through together. So that works well, and that works much better, especially on the longer projects. Another area we haven't talked about, I think, is change management. So this is going to change the way people do things. Workday is different to other systems in the way it's worked. To say it's a user-led system, and because it's different, people work differently, and that change process and going through that change process is important to get it right. The bigger the organization, the bigger the change, but it's still, that's just the same with any project. The bigger the organization, the more you've got to do. And similar to the test manager, get them in early. You can't
get them in really early.
You can't get the change people in the last week. They need to be there. Probably not at the kickoff, but not soon after the kickoff.
Yeah. Sam, we need to get the test managers in super early, like way before they've even decided on Workday would be a good idea. So I'm glad we're talking about change management, because change management even in HCM projects is an area that is always overlooked, and it's sometimes, you've got data, you've got integrations, which are big issues, which of course we'll move on to in a minute, but change is perhaps as important, because if you don't have a good change person, no one's going to use it.
No, and probably more so in HR than finance, but a lot of HR, it becomes a user system. Booking holidays, well, you do it yourself. You don't write an email to someone to book it into a system. You do it yourself on your phone. Those sorts of things. Sounds simple, but suddenly people look after their own data in HR. And that is a huge change for an organisation and people in an organisation. That needs to be managed in very carefully. And there's additional self-service in finance. If you don't manage it in, it doesn't get done. If it doesn't get done, your numbers don't add up because people haven't done it, or stock doesn't move around or whatever. So these pieces, change management is huge and really important.
And data and integrations in finance.
Yes. Data's always a big thing, because it'll be all over your existing systems, and potentially, depending on how many there are, you might have data spaced in lots of different places, and it all needs to be converted to a new set of codes, because codes are going to change, cleaned on the way probably, and then into Workday. It's a very, very understated probably, but it's easily 40% of your project is probably data and data migration. And not minimize getting the HR data correct, that is, but you've got to get the finance data correct. The numbers have to add up exactly the same as they did before, and that can be that's a big job to get right, and to get the right people in doing that. And your second point on integrations, chances are Workday won't give you everything you need. there will be systems out there you need to connect to. So there's going to be integrations, and tends to be an area that you need to get the right people in, the right person in. So before, a PM who is technically astute, who understands pipes and networks and the difference between various different types of integrations, so they can understand it. And they need to work with a partner, but the partner will only get you so far. The partner will get you the link into Workday, but you need to go and build all the other links. You need to get out to the other activity and other internal systems. So those areas there are very important to get involved. And I'll say again, early. I always want people in early.
Critical, isn't it?
It is. Build your team as soon as you can.
Yeah.
We talked about the business analyst earlier. I'd want the business analyst whilst I'm writing the RFP, because that's when you get your requirements. A lot of times they don't get the right person writing the RFP. You select the wrong product because you haven't defined what you wanted enough. And then a few months later, you're wondering why you selected this product, because you haven't got the requirements correct.
Yeah. Yeah, some really, really, really good points. And going back to another joke here, going back to getting the people in early again, test managers. So we are coming to the end of the webinar, the allotted time. So we've going to run through some of the questions, see if there's any more questions that we've not asked. Do you think there's, oh God, this is a really good question. This is a really good question. Do you think there's such a thing as an all-rounder? I don't know whether he means someone who's done HCM and finance, or someone who can do all of the different parts, because within financials, there's different areas that even the best Workday Financials guys have not got experience of some of those areas. So do you think, let's go for an all-rounder in finance. Is there such a thing as, you ever come across a good all-rounder?
I think a point you make, you learn all of financials. So you, as a financial consultant, you learn it all, but you can't get deep on it all. So you might end up being on the supplier side. So you know all about procurement and accounts payable. To get to the depths of procurement and accounts payable, you're not going to then be able to get to the depths of accounts receivable and customer side, because you'll glaze at a certain level, or you'll go deep on one. And I think when looking, particularly from the partners that I've worked with, they tend to have specialists within certain areas. Now, on the client side of the project, for a business analyst, for example, they probably can look across the whole of finance, because they don't have to go that deep in understanding how the system works to be able to configure it, but they can understand processes across the finance area. So a business analyst can certainly look across the whole of finance. But the question might also say, do you have an all-rounder who can look after all of the components of the project? So depending on the size of the project, you could have on a smaller implementation a PM and a BA sitting, the same person doing both. You could have a data migration and integrations PM who's covered both, because they're technical and they can understand the technical part of it. I don't think you can have one person that covers the whole of it, because at some stage you'll generally lean on the bit that you're more comfortable with and drop the other piece. So it comes down to the size of the program, I think. It depends whether you have an all-rounder. But I know some people who do. I know PMs who do business analysis, and they cover them off either at the same time, or sometimes there'll be a PM and sometimes there'll be a BA, and that can work.
Yes, it's a good point. We've got a lady who's ex Big Four. She went contracting a few years ago, and she's actually working on a fairly big implementation for us in the DAC region at the moment. And I've placed a number of our old colleagues before and had open conversations with those guys, and these are all finance guys. And whenever you ask who's the best person as a Workday Financials consultant that you know, they always say her. However, there are areas of finance she doesn't know. And she openly admits, I don't really do that. I could pick it up, but you're probably going to get someone better in that area than me. But yeah, if you ask most people in the partner space, they'll tell you she's certainly at the higher end of what's available or what's not available in my well, no, they're not readily available people, are they? So yeah, it's interesting. Bless Sam, she's saying we're talking about getting the test managers in early, and she's actually put on here, it's too late now, I've got a job. We play. She started on Monday. Cheers, Sam. We got a few here, but they're not really developing over from what we've already discussed. So I think we are about to wrap up, I guess, with the questions. But look, Kevin, it's been great to have you on. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think this is actually the second time me and you have done something like this. If you remember,
yes, it is. Yes,
like 2.5 years ago, something.
Yes, we did something similar.
Yeah, I remember. See,
so I put it in my diary for 2 years. 2 years now. 2 years in the future, we'll be doing it again.
Yeah. So that's the 27th of August, 2022.
Okay, it's there.
I probably won't have any hair then. Through stress. But, a final word from you for the audience. Positive word.
Positive word. So, for a finance function, they should not be scared. Certainly, they'll be scared of implementing Workday. It will change the way finance functions work for the better, and it changes the way the system is owned and the system is supported, which I think then works better going forward because you get this evolving solution that can work as the business moves. People need to challenge the way they work, because if you challenge the way you currently work, then Workday will work better for you because you'll move into using Workday positively. Obviously, you need to build the right team, but if you build the right team, get it right, then you will be successful and hopefully enjoy Workday because it's the type of system that I think people enjoy using. Yeah,
you need to contact the right recruiter who can get you the right team.
I was just about to say that.
Sorry. I should have said that on this. We've got a really good question that I really want to ask you before we go. How long do you see deployments lasting? And also compared to HCM deployments, do finance deployments have additional timelines? Just quickly.
Piece of string. I think Workday, they have different deployment methods. They would say between 6 to 9 months is a financials implementation. HCM has lots of different modules. So you can have core HCM, then you can add on learning and recruitment and payroll. Finance is one box. You implement finance or you don't. So it's all in one. Whether you use it all in one, it's irrelevant. You still get it all. Yeah. So there's no tail of implementations. But I would say between 6 and 9 months for a standard implementation.
Okay. That's for finance.
For finance.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you could do HCM and finance, core HCM and finance also in that 6 to 9 months, especially if you use their launch methodology, which gets it in quicker, yes, and then you evolve through using it.
I'm going to ask you another question. I'm really sorry. It's all over the place. Does launch work in your opinion?
I have to say I've never done a launch implementation, so I can't answer that in reality. I see no reason why it shouldn't work, but I think with launch for finance, it can be a bit restrictive because you have to follow a very defined implementation structure. And finance probably doesn't fit it, but I've never seen it. So I think finance has to take a bigger change on that necessarily in HM, but I've never been on that type of project, so I can't really comment.
Yeah, we had someone on the webinar beforehand who said that he was a finance guy, and he said he wasn't a fan of launch for finance, mm-hmm, because of the restrictions that you'll get once you go live.
Yeah.
But what he did say, it was just about accepting the fact that that's what you're going to get, and working around that, and then understanding that you're going to have to develop,
Yeah.
you're going to have to develop Workday a lot more. So perhaps there's going to be more business processes that you need to change once you've gone live, because you don't have that functionality internally.
No, not immediately, and then you work it in as you go. You get there quicker, you get something quicker, but not everything you want.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we've come to the end of our allotted time. So thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time, and thank you to the attendees for joining the webinar. We don't know. I don't know whether I'd like some feedback for the guys that are on this. We don't know whether we're going to continue these webinars or change the format a little bit. This is the 9th one. When we started the original one, we've had sort of 150 plus people on these calls and registrations. Now, we don't expect everyone to come on live who registers. Some people just wait for the recording to come through, but it seems like the numbers are waning a little bit as the webinars go on, and we want to make sure that people are still interested. So when you get the question after this happens, please be open, honest, give some feedback on improvements. Let us know whether you think we should continue doing it this way or whether we should do it a different way. We're all ears, and we just want to give you value. So yeah, I mean, I've got nothing more to say, Kevin. I thought it was great speaking to you.
Yeah, it's great.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. We're only down the road from each other, aren't we?
We are.
Maybe I'll drop you a can of 6 in a minute to your doorstep, and
that'd be very nice.
All right, take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all for joining us.